Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'll be reacting to Self-Fulfilling Imagination by Acharya Prashant. I'm not sure I said his name correctly. This is a new person that was recommended. I was looking through his videos. He has a lot of shorts, and I'm looking for a video that's at least a year old. I want to react to more older things first and foremost before anything that's at the very least 30 days old, a month old. So, self-fulfilling imagination, that is I've not heard of that before. I've heard of self-fulfilling prophecies, which is generally meaning like if you think something's going to happen, really think it's going to happen, you end up sometimes fulfilling that prophecy. So for example, if you think something bad's gonna happen to you in like 3 days, and you're obsessing over it, and you're like, oh no, if I do this, something bad's gonna happen, you may end up fulfilling that prophecy because you believe in it so much. But self-fulfilling imagination, I've not heard of that before, so let's go ahead and give them a shot.
You not only imagine the future, your imagination becomes the future. You not only imagine the other person's behavior, your imagination of the other person's behavior causes the other person to behave in a particular way.
Causes the other person? I wouldn't say that. I'm curious to hopefully explain that a little bit more. I would say that maybe you perceive it that way because, again, kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where when you think someone, I guess it's kind of like a thing that you create in your own head. Again, this is the full video. Is on his YouTube channel, so I might be missing some pieces here. But yeah, if you believe someone to be really bad towards you, even though they're really nice, you may think, oh, they're scheming at something, oh, they're planning something evil, even though they're really not. Just because you think it, you perceive their intentions as evil, and not because they are in fact evil.
You must have heard that famous Mullah Nasruddin story. So Mullah Nasruddin is these days quite fearful of unknown enemies, as many of us always are. So in the night he is going somewhere and he hears a lot of drum beating, a lot of people shouting excitably, and it almost sounds like an army marching towards somewhere. Also from a distance he sees that they are carrying torches, mashals and other kinds of light. Some of them are displaying swords.
It's like a mob.
The mullah become convinced that this is an army coming to harm me. So he starts looking suspiciously at them, hides behind a bush, climbs up a tree, does all kinds of things that a suspicious mind does. Now a few among the marching party.
Sorry, I laugh at the suspicious mind because I think that's an Elvis Presley song. It just reminded me of that for some odd reason.
They come to see that a man is eyeing us very suspiciously. So they also start seeing, who is this man? Is he a highway robber or somebody?
Oh.
Is he a spy sent by a team of goons? Incidentally, it is a wedding party marching towards the bride's house. Wedding parties are anyway no very different from armies. So both aim to loot and pick up and abduct and all kinds of things. You find horses and swords and guns and mad people in both the places. So they start chasing Mullah. He's a bad man and he's up for some mischief. The Mullah runs to save his dear life. Now he is totally convinced that people are planning to kill him. The harder he runs, the more this party is convinced that he is an evil man, and now that he has been spotted, he is running towards his own camp, and from there he will get reinforcements and turn around to attack back. So they run harder. The harder they run, Mullah also runs harder. Soon he is exhausted.
That's weird. I mean, the other party, the wedding people, I suppose, see him and think he's a bad person, but he kind of changed it up to where it's like, oh, now he's going after his party. I mean, I guess maybe like looking at them as a bandits, and I get what he's saying now, where it literally is how you perceive someone, and then they become that because of how you perceive them. I get that now. So basically, if you think they're a bad person and you kind of treat them in a certain way, and then the other person, but the problem is I think the other person kind of has to have that kind of the same thing as you do to kind of, I guess, reflect that energy in a sense, because you're like, oh man, he's always looking at me, I better keep an eye on him now. And so now that so one person says, oh, he looks suspicious, he's after me, and then the other guy's like, oh man, he's looking at me weird, wonder why, I better keep an eye on him. And all of a sudden they fulfill the first person's prophecy of he's spying on me or he's doing something bad towards me, and the other person's like, oh, I'm wondering what's going on. And he kind of, by being curious, he kind of fulfills that prophecy. Incidentally, the other person fulfills that prophecy by doing what he was doing. So it's not necessarily a what do you call it, a self-fulfilling prophecy, in terms of the fact that whenever I was like, oh, she's evil, she's always doing something suspicious, but in my example, the other person does nothing, doesn't think of anything, and maybe says, oh, that's the way that person is, just always looking at me weird, it's fine, it's whatever. Where his example is more along the lines that the other person all of a sudden gets suspicious too, which I see both possibilities.
There are so many stories about him. Surely he's an old man by now. So he finds a graveyard, and there is an open grave. Mullah goes and lies down in that grave.
That's weird.
But the marching party traces him, and they all come around and they stand around that grave, and pointing swords at him, they say, who are you? Get up.
So they do have swords.
He says, I'm a dead man. They say, we want to hear the dead man talking, you get up. He says, I won't get up. You're all right, lying down there, tell us, what are you doing here in this grave? He says, I want to ask the same question, what are you doing here? Now they start looking at each other and they say, this man looks more like a moron than a marauder.
I hope it means
Mullah
more.
gets a hint. After all, he is often presented as a saint also. Some hidden wisdom is there surely. So he tells them, you know what, I have understood. You are here because of me and I am here because of you.
Oh, yeah.
That is what imagination does. That which you imagine finds a strange way to materialize. You imagine somebody as an enemy, and it is possible that he will indeed start acting as an enemy. You imagine that your boss is out to harm you, and through your own ways you will cause your boss to harm you. And when imagination materializes, you know what is the logic that the ego gets armed with, see, it was not merely imagination, it was my prescience. And because imagination materialized, hence in the future also, whenever you imagine, you must take your imagination seriously. You see how the loop operates? First of all, you imagine, then your behavior gets attuned to your imagination, and that causes the world to behave as per your imagination. So your imagination materializes, and when your imagination materializes, your mind says, see, you must take imagination seriously, they materialize. Hence the next time when you imagine, you take your imagination even more seriously, hence the chances of your imagination materializing only increase further. And when even the second time your imagination turns into so-called reality, your mind gets even more power to convince you that imaginations are not just imaginations, they are a foreteller of the events to come. And so our belief in our power to imagine keeps deepening.
I would have said that a little bit differently, but I get what it's saying. So I would have said like, you think of something, you don't know whether it's true or not. He's like, oh man, that person's suspicious, so you start following that person, and then as because of your actions, that person does, you start to also enforce or misinterpret that person's action to confirm your imagination, as he says it. So even though he's not doing what you're imagining, but you're justifying what he's doing to confirm your imagination. And then all of a sudden, when because of your actions that person kind of acts the way you think he acts, then he's like, aha, that does it, that's truth, that's automatically true, that confirms my biases. So it's kind of like your imagination, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy type of thing, although his goes a little bit different in terms of that it affects other people too, where the self-fulfilling prophecies generally is just you yourself, and the other person doesn't necessarily get affected by it. His example, at least from my understanding, is that not only are you affected by your own imagination, your imagination also affects other people around you, which very much true as well. But yeah, it's basically a self-fulfilling, because when you imagine someone doing something, even though what they're doing is completely innocent, completely legit, you find ways to justify their actions. Like, haha, this is why he's doing that, not because he's doing that for legitimate reasons. You're saying he's doing that to get back at me, he's doing that to get me fired, he's doing that to do harm to me. He's not doing that to be legit, he's doing that to harm me. And you're confirming this bias in your mind, and then you're really, I guess, really digging deep into there, and then starts really hammering it on that person, and you're like following him, you're just being so strange that all of a sudden that person acts the way that you thought he acted, because how your actions are so blatant to that person. Oh wow, okay. So the video will be in the link in the description below. Did I say that correctly? So I'll see about reacting to more of his stuff. But yeah, that's very interesting, because I've never heard self-fulfilling imagination. It's generally, at least over here, it said self-fulfilling prophecies. And generally the prophecy is what you think is going to happen. Oh, that person's got it out for me. So that's the prophecy. And then all of a sudden, because of that prophecy, you start thinking, let me watch him, let me see what he does. Like, oh, that he's doing it because he's going to try to get me fired, even though he's maybe just getting donuts out for someone or whatever. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecies where you stop doing your work and you start paying more attention to the person. Then all of a sudden this person's like hanging out with the boss or whatever. It's like, oh, he's trying to get close friends with the boss. I see what's going on there. And then you go talk to your boss, like, I see what you're doing, and you're basically you're creating this rift between you and your boss, and your boss is like, man, you're acting weird, what's going on? And you're like being nasty to your boss, and then eventually the boss is like, okay, look, man, you've been acting weird, you're fired. And he's like, haha, I knew it, you were being friends with that person and I was good with you, and all of a sudden you fired me. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Anyways, that's my reaction to self-fulfilling imagination with Acharya Prashant. If you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.